Dear fathers, we come before you this evening. We give you thanks for all the precious things that you allowed us to have in order to continue in your ways, studying with brothers and sisters. As we go through this meeting, we ask that our eyes, ears be opened so that we can fully understand, learn, and be able to apply to everything, to our daily lives, and strengthen our ways so that we may be received into your kingdom. We do this through your Son, Jesus, and thank you for all we have. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Neil. All right, so we are well into the whole series on God's hand is in it all. So the first one was of the transfiguration, that all three men had fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and that they had received a revelation on a mountain. The last one, well, number 10 anyway, that's going to be brought up, is that they're all hidden in death. Moses was hidden by God in death. Elisha went up to heaven in a whirlwind, and Christ sits at the right hand of the Father. So, what's interesting thing to think about was whether Moses and Elijah were reserved to stay around for the transfiguration, not in consciousness, but waiting for that moment. The second one is that they were great reformers, and we went over this last time, that they all challenged the people they were with politically, and that Moses and Elijah and Christ all did that. And we are now on Christ challenging the religious rulers of his day. So we've done Moses and we've done Elijah. And first we did the 40 days of fasting on the mountain, receiving a revelation. And then the next one I believe we did was resurrection. Is that the next one we did? I believe so. Now we're on this. So all three of the transfiguration delivered their people from oppression, slavery, national idolatry, and death, yet remarkably in different ways. Notably, the Jewish people, the leaders, and religious rulers all expected the Messiah to overthrow the Roman government and establish his kingdom in their time. That's why they were so easy to reject him, because he didn't do what they thought he should do. So it's about managing expectation. What was the sign they were attentively seeking? Instead, Christ taught discipleship by love of one another. He challenged the religious leaders of the day by performing miracles on the Sabbath and reprimanding the Pharisees and Sadducees for their burdens that they laid heavily upon the people. He criticized them for turning God's temple into a marketplace and a bank. It was like the first national Israeli bank. They both, at both the beginning and the end of his ministry, he purged the temple complex with whips and with a mighty hand. He was a reformer, yet not the kind of Jewish population expected. His ministry could have covered 7 years, yet it was cut in half because they rejected him as their shepherd. And that's in, I believe, Zechariah chapter 12. Actually 11. Verse 12. Can I get a read for this one, Walter?
All right, let's start with Roger tonight. Okay. All right, Zechariah 11:12. Then I said to them, if it seems right to you, give me my wages, but if not, keep them. So they weighed my wages, 30 pieces of silver. Throw it to the potter. The Lord said to me, this magnificent price I was valued by them. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw it into the house of the Lord to the potter. Then I cut in two my second staff, my union annulling the brotherhood between Judah and Israel.
So he breaks the staff because he's breaking union between the brotherhood of Judah and Israel. And this is in Zechariah 11. And it's talking about the 30 pieces of silver. It's talking about his job and it being thrown into the house and going to the potter. All the things that Judas did. And here we got Judas kissing Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. So all of this came to pass. So this is what tells us they cut my time in half. So it went from 7 years to 3.5 years, but he was still enough time to challenge the religious leaders of the day. Second next reader.
In Zechariah 9, the messianic predictions seem all-encompassing, including that his dominion would extend from the Euphrates to the Nile to be a global empire. Zechariah describes his people as jewels in a crown sparkling over the land. Instead, they rejected the chief cornerstone, who was the perfect shepherd. Their consequence was banishment and exile over the whole globe. 40 years after Christ's crucifixion in 70 AD, the Romans expunged Israel from the land.
So I'm reading a book right now called Empire of the Sun. It takes place in Shanghai, China in 1941. And it's about a little British taipan who grows up in the international settlement where 14 different governments were present. And his nanny, who took care of him, was a German Jew who fled just to get to Shanghai, just to survive. And she wound up being his nanny in that time period because there was no place else on earth for them to go. And the true record is 18,000 Jews left Germany and came to Shanghai to get away from the persecution. So people did whatever they had to do to get away from the situation. And they didn't start coming back till after World War II. Yes.
It's worth noting that AD 70 was the beginning of the diaspora, the reminder, but the final part of it was done in AD 135 when the Romans said, I have absolutely had enough of you, go. And that's when they made sure whoever else was left was out of there, because they'd had enough of rebellions and all the other things that were happening. But we all think about AD 70 like, yeah, that's the point.
So it's 153 or 156?
In AD 135.
135, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Which is interesting, like, but like,
And who ordered that one? Which Caesar?
I don't remember which Caesar it was,
Okay.
but it's generally talked about a lot of times when.
You should know that one. Roger?
No, never.
Yeah. He did all the stuff for Revelation.
No, I just copied and pasted it.
This is a light little selection from Zechariah 9.
Oh, thanks. Oh,
I like this.
I'm glad you got this one. Thanks much. All right, here we go. Zechariah 9. The coming of Zion's king. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout in triumph, daughter Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem. The bow of war will be removed, and he will proclaim peace to the nations. His dominion will extend from sea to sea, from the Euphrates River to the ends of the earth. And as for you, because of the blood of your covenant, I will release your prisoners from the waterless system. Return to a stronghold, your prisoners who have hope. Today I declare that I will restore double to you. For I will bend Judah as my bow. I will fill that bow with Ephraim. I will rouse your sons, Zion, against your sons, Greece. I will make you like a warrior's sword. Then the Lord will appear over them, and his arrow will fly like lightning. The Lord God will sound the trumpet and advance with the southern storms. The Lord of hosts will defend them. It will consume and conquer with slingstone. It will drink and be rowdy as if with wine. It will be as full as a sprinkling basin, like those at the corners of the altar. The Lord their God will save them on that day as the flock of his people, for they are like jewels in a crown, sparkling over his land.
So I wasn't kidding when I said jewels in the crown sparkling over the land. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So this is a prediction of Christ and his ministry. Go ahead.
Let's see. Susie, let's start with you, please. And remember, you have to unmute.
Okay, Christ was challenged by the Pharisees, Sadducees, and religious leaders on numerous occasions. They constantly attacked him with hard questions, which even they could not answer. But his responses silenced them. Whether the question was about paying taxes to Caesar or whose life someone would be in the resurrection. whose wife. Just as Moses and Elijah challenged the ruling classes of Pharaoh and his court and the wicked dynasty of Ahab and Jezebel, Christ did not remain silent about hypocrisy, wickedness, or duplicity. In Matthew 23, he delivered a total of 16 indictments against the leaders. The first 7 are before the woes, yet are still indictments.
Yeah, people always limit that chapter. He covers a lot of ground in chapter 23. More people say, oh, there's 7. I'm like, nope, there's a lot more than that. From my count, I count 16 separate indictments.
It's funny. I know in modern times they teach you, they say when you go to law school, one of the first things they teach you as you become a lawyer is never ask a question that you don't know the answer to.
Oh yeah.
And these lawyers or of the law itself, or the rabbinic law, would foolishly ask questions of the one who could answer each and every question and do the proper answer.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
interesting, huh?
They were so confident, and he still
He,
dispelled them all.
yeah, he did. It was beautiful.
It is beautiful. So here is, I'm not kidding you with the 16 that I found. These are all of them. And people only say, oh, there's 7 woes. I'm like, no, there's not. There's a whole lot more than that. He charges them with utter hypocrisy. They're teaching one thing and doing nothing. They don't lighten the people's load. So the next one is burdening the people. They make them toe the line when they themselves won't do it. Everything they do, they're doing to be seen by others, to get external validation of how holy, great, and wonderful they are. Number 4, that it was all for physical show, so they negated what glory God may give them. They always chose the best, the places of honor, to sit, and then taking the best and everything they wanted was number 6. They loved to be called rabbi. That's why Christ said, don't allow yourselves to be called a rabbi. They locked up the keys to the kingdom, and they dissuade people from finding the door to salvation. That was number 8. They devoured widows' houses, which I despise. That's one of my ones I absolutely abhor. You could separate the next one if you wanted to into making long prayers. Yeah, I went through enough of that in my youth. And then they make a proselyte hellish followers. In other words, they traveled to the ends of the earth to get somebody to convert to Judaism, and then they make them even worse than they are. And then 11 is they make all these erroneous oaths that have nothing to do with God. They neglect the law. With mercy, justice, and faith. Number 12, number 13, they clean the outside, but not the inside. 14, they're whitewashed tombs, but they're filled with hypocrisy and lawlessness. 15, and this is very interesting, he indicts them for building monuments to the prophets. It's like, that's unbelievable. You killed them, and you're going to build a monument to them. Same thing the Catholic Church did over and over again with the saints. You know, they killed who they now call saints. And I'm like, you killed them. How in the world can you build a monument to them? The final indictment, because they claim to be innocent, they're guilty. And he puts what kind of guilt on them? The biggest guilt I've ever seen anywhere. From Abel to Zechariah. That's all. Can you imagine all the innocent blood from Abel to Zechariah? That's before the flood. So before the flood till after the whole thing. So
Because Zechariah, the Zechariah they're speaking of is probably the Zechariah killed in the temple.
right.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the Abel part.
Oh, the Abel part, yes, certainly.
So can I get a reader for Hebrews 23? Read it real quick.
Okay, Patsy, you're up, please.
I'll read it. Patsy's having her dinner, so I'll read
Thank
it.
you. I was gonna say, I just took my
Right.
bite of food.
Religious hypocrites denounced. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples. The scribes and the Pharisees are seated in the chair of Moses.
Therefore, do whatever they tell you and observe it, but don't do what they do because they don't practice what they teach. They tie up heavy loads that are hard to carry and put them on people's shoulders, but they themselves aren't willing to lift a finger to move them. They do everything to be observed by others. They enlarge their phylacteries and lengthen their tassels. They love the place of honor at banquets, the front seats at the synagogues, greetings in the marketplace, and to be called rabbi by people. But as for you, do not be called rabbi, because you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. Do not call anyone on earth your father, because you have one Father who is in heaven. And do not be called masters either, because you have one master, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted.
They'll be tired too. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for reading that. This is the next part. You can continue if you want to, but if you pick somebody.
Okay. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You lock up the kingdom of heaven from people. You don't go in, and you don't allow those entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You devour widows' houses and make long prayers just for show. This is why you will receive a harsher punishment. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to make one proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as fit for hell as you are.
Yeah, so you can see they've made their culpability, their guilt even greater by the things that they've said and what they've done to compound it. So this wasn't easy. I mean, what could the Pharisees threaten people with? Did they have power? Yeah. What could they do?
Stone, right?
Once you were thrown out of the synagogue, nobody would have business with you. Good luck living and eating and doing anything, or even selling your wares to anybody.
Exactly. So they could excommunicate you, which is a powerful tool. You can't come in the synagogue. Roger said they could stone you, which they certainly did try to do.
Right.
Stephen.
Mhm.
They stoned Stephen.
They also put people in prison. That was another option. They could make a pact with the Romans and get them thrown in the clink if that was possible. So there was lots of tools at their disposal to get rid of these people. Walter?
Neil, it's your turn. Remember to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I hear you there. I just had to turn on my speaker. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever takes an oath by the sanctuary, it means nothing. But whoever takes the oath by gold of the sanctuary is bound by his oath. Blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the sanctuary that sanctified the gold? Also, whoever takes an oath by the altar, it means nothing. But whoever takes the oath by the gift that was on it is bound by his oath. Blind people, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, the one who takes an oath by the altar takes an oath by it, and then by everything else on it. The one who takes oath by the sanctuary takes an oath by it and by him who dwells in it. And the one who takes an oath by heaven takes an oath by God's throne, and by him who sits on it.
I want you to think about this for a minute. I think this Christ's answer is so myth busting, if you will. It blows the roof off this stupid, idiotic tradition. Okay. So, first of all, if you're in a business deal and you can't let your yes be yes and your no be no, these people were taking it one step further. They were swearing by something. Usually, if you're in a brokering a deal, you back it up with collateral. You say, this is my word, This is my signature. I'm backing it up with this collateral to say that what I'm doing is true. If you were going to take it a step further and be personal, it should have been something of personal sacrifice. I bet my car, I bet the title to my home that this is true. You're backing up what you're saying with your own stuff, with your own property. But now the Jews had gotten to the point where they were swearing by something they could not give up. They were swearing by the altar, by the gold on the altar, by the gift on the altar. None of that was theirs to touch. It belonged to God. So they're swearing on God's things that they're not lying, and they're still lying. So, and to me, it's just like they've doubled their guilt by doing that too. You know, if you say, yeah, this apple weighs 3 pounds, I swear on the altar. And I'm like, I've never seen a 3-pound apple. I doubt it. If it was a pumpkin, maybe. Do you guys understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So it isn't like, yes, this is 5 ounces of wheat. Instead, they'd say, I swear by the altar and the temple that this is 5 ounces of wheat. I'm like, it's not yours to give. You shouldn't be swearing by it anyway. It makes no sense. But they were so illogical. That's how far they had taken this. So Christ needed to purge this whole thought out of the whole system. So this day that he said this, I guarantee you the marketplace changed immediately. Nobody was going to be trusted who said this anymore. Do you get what I'm saying? Because anybody who said this would be like automatically discounted after that. Who's the guy's name? Who was the guy, the Ponzi scheme who was doing it on Wall Street because of the M?
Bernie
Him.
Madoff,
Bernie.
Madoff, or how
Madoff.
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 So it's like swearing
Madoff.
by Bernie Madoff, you know, in the marketplace, if they were to continue to do that. Everybody knew who Bernie Madoff is and what he did and what a Ponzi scheme was, so they wouldn't be trusted. Anybody who swore by the altar, the gift, or the gold after this, it'd be like saying the same dumb thing after that. So Christ is really reforming his generation. And the lesson to us is we need to do the same. When I find Christadelphians who say, oh, don't say that, you're gonna spook it, you're gonna make it go wrong. I'm like, we are not a superstitious people. If you want to be superstitious and you want to believe that breaking a chicken bone and making a wish, or blowing out a candle and making a wish, or that somebody spooked your horse because they, you know, kicked up dust in front of it, all those things are superstitious. They have nothing to do with the basis of reality. If you believe that kind of stuff, you can move to Haiti because they do believe in all of that, and voodoo dolls and many, many other things. So like Moses, like Elijah, like Christ, all three of them dispelled all the lies in their generation. They went after the top dogs that caused these lies to be spread. Ahab and Jezebel, Pharaoh and his whole court, and in Christ's case, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders of the day, because they were the ones spinning it up. They were the ones creating these false delusions that were not true. What are some of the ones that we could try to dispel? One of them is guilt by association. That is still alive, kicking and well in Christadelphian circles. We can be that reformer. We can go out and say, this is false. It is expelled by Christ himself when he says, you call John the Baptist this, you call me this, because of who we're hanging out with. You call the Son of Man a winebibber and a glutton because I hang out with tax collectors and prostitutes. And he says, stop judging by mere appearances. So for us, we have the opportunity to do the same, to expel untruths. I got next reader.
Okay. Joanne, you're up next, please.
You skip Patsy? She's still eating.
Okay.
Come back.
Christ challenge. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, Hypocrites, you pay a tenth of mint, dill, and cumin, yet you have neglected the more important matter of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. These things should have been done without neglecting the others. Blind guides, you strain out a gnat, yet gulp down and
A camel. So let's stop there. If Christ was alive today, could he say about the Christadelphians, you strain out gnats and gulp down a camel? Could he successfully say that about us? Think about it. Both amended, Berean, Dawn, and unamended, tolerate and deal with marriage, divorce, remarriage, and whatever. But we will strain out the gnat in our statements of faith that are slightly off and make that an absolute line in the sand, a bronze wall that nobody can cross over. So I think Christ could successfully say this about us today, and it is an indictment. This is how you strain out gnats, and this is how you gulp down camels. So it's something that we need to think critically about, and we think, well, there's no indictment against us. Paul was constantly writing letters to the ecclesias and telling them, you need to fix these things. These things are good, but these things you gotta fix. Christ's 7 letters to the 7 ecclesias, they didn't hold that back, did they? In Revelation?
Nope.
He said the truth. He's like, you need to fix these things. So we need to ask ourselves, what kind of letter would Paul or Christ write our meeting today? Keep going, sorry. Verse 25 through 28.
woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup, so the outside of it may become clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but the inside are full of dead men's bones and every impurity. In the same way, on an outside you seem righteous to people, but inside you're full of hypocrisy and lawlessness.
So what's interesting about this is that now it's kind of come full circle. We have been duped by the world in this respect. We have to look beautiful all the time. The whitest teeth, dye your hair, get rid of the wrinkles, be totally fit all the time. Otherwise, people won't have any love or respect for you. You have to keep up these appearances of never aging, staying gorgeous all the time. When Christ is saying here very distinctly to the Pharisees and to the rest, you look good on the outside, but you're not clean on the inside. So which has a weightier emphasis by Christ? The inside or the outside?
The inside, of course.
Thank you. Took a while for us to get there. But everybody still puts all this emphasis on, oh, we gotta whiten our teeth, we gotta get rid of the wrinkles, we have to dye our hair, we have to lose weight. I'm like, none of that freaking matters. Methuselah lived 969 years. Do you think he was caught up in all that mess? Or do you think his character was more important? And for us, our lives are even shorter. Ours are less than a 12th of what Methuselah lived. With the time we're fully grown up in our 20s, we start to deteriorate. From the moment we reach maturity, we start to deteriorate. Our cells start literally dying. So to me, God's made the point over and over again, and he's like, I'm going to shorten your life so you really see it. What is your spiritual development and your character is what I'm after. If you chase after what the world is after, you've got an impossible task. You have to be like Dorian Gray and stay beautiful forever. And you've got to constantly keep applying all these cosmetics to look like everybody expects you to look. Here's my assessment. My favorite time of year is the fall. Why is that? Because all the growth shows its full color in its full maturity. People love the fall because that's the time of year you see the reds and the oranges and all these different colors. Same thing with people. You see the full color spectrum when they are mature in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s. That is when the full beauty is exposed, not when they're young and dumb and don't have any wisdom. It's at the end of their lives that they show you all the greatness of who they really are. So I wish we saw things the way Christ did. It would make a big difference to how people perceive their bodies, how they look, and all the rest of it. It would be saying, let's shape our character. This is what Christ is asking for here. And in all of this, there's a lot of lessons for us to learn. And it's easy to say, oh, this is the fingers he was pointing at the Pharisees and Sadducees. Let's make sure it doesn't get pointed at us. Go ahead with the next one.
Gerald, you're up, please.
Okay. Verse 29, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we wouldn't have taken part with them in shedding the prophets' blood. You therefore testify against yourselves that you are sons of those who murder the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your father's sins. Snakes, brood of vipers, how can you escape being condemned to hell? This is why I'm sending you the prophets, sages, and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will flog in your synagogues and hound from town to town. So all the righteous blood shed on the earth will be charged to you, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. I assure you, all these things will come on this generation.
So it is a unbelievable indictment, and the people heard this. And he's telling them this is the other power that they had. They would flog people in a synagogue. Can you imagine being whipped in a modern day church? It's unbelievable. And then literally giving them no peace, hunting them down from town to town. Who do we know that absolutely did that? Paul. He got letters so he could go chase them. He's like, give me official letters. I'll go on travel. I'll go hunt these people down and I'll bring them back. So that's literally the power that they had. It wasn't just you can't come to synagogue anymore, or you can't buy and sell in the marketplace. It's like, we will hunt you down. We will flog you. We will put you in prison. And eventually, like Christ, they'll be crucified. So there's a lot that Christ is doing here to challenge the religious rulers of the day, just like Moses and Elijah. And I'm sure it was a very fearful time for all three of them. Go ahead, Walter.
Brother David, if you're able, please.
Could someone just read the first line? I think I can read it. That's fine. Jesus had the opportunity to challenge his accusers, enemies of God and opponents, during the 3 trials he suffered before his crucifixion. Yet he remained silent in all of them, not responding so that God's will would be carried out. From Isaiah 53:7, he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, and like a sheep silent before her shearers, he did not open his mouth. He was taken away because of oppression and judgment. And who considered his fate? For he was cut off from the land of the living. He was struck because of my people's rebellion.
Very good, thank you. So I just want you to see that in spite of, you can see in chapter 23, he gives these indictments, bam, 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 bam. There's no answers to any of them. The Pharisees couldn't respond. So as a litigator, Christ could have blown these people away if he was going to speak out in court. And he had 3 trials that night. Okay. He could have refuted every single witness they called forth. He could have undermined every accusation against him. We just saw it in Matthew 23. So the big thing is that he remained silent for our sake, because he could have gotten out of it. He could have argued his way right out of the room. He could have built constituents. He could have lobbied for his case and or compromised it, but he didn't. And it's all predicted in Isaiah 53:7 that he wouldn't do these things. So it's amazing to me to know that he was such a good orator. When they came to him and said, should we pay taxes or not? He's like, let me see a denarii. Whose picture? Yep, pay the guy whose picture is on this coin. What a brilliant answer. He could have had an answer for everything in a courtroom scene. And yet we kind of overlook this because he didn't say anything. If he had, it would have been the best speech ever. So it's a lot to think about that he never opened his mouth because he was going to let all their false indictments come true. Next reader.
Nancy, can you read this?
Okay. The blood guilt of Christ's crucifixion and false trial cost Israel everything. Christ had challenged I can't read that last line.
Every aspect of their religious rulers.
Of the religious rulers of his time. Their doctrine, tradition, hypocrisy, lack of mercy, greed, and overall wickedness as the shepherds of his people. They refused to change, just as Pharaoh and his court drowned in the Red Sea, and the house of Ahab was completely destroyed by Jehu. Jesus' generation and its leaders were completely expelled from their country. By 70 AD, there would be no future Pharisees, Sadducees, religious leaders, or temple. God wiped the cup clean, and they would become a vanished civilization. Perhaps the clearest understanding of God's anger toward each generation of the 3 at the Transfiguration can be found in 2 Kings.
Thank you for reading that, Nancy. So you can see how all 3 of these men challenged the people of their generation to the highest extent. They didn't go for some underling. They went right to the top, to the king and queen, to the Pharaoh and his court, and to the religious leaders of Christ's day. They didn't settle for second best. They went straight to the top and brought their indictments against them. So here's one from 2 Kings.
Okay, we're back around. Roger, me again?
All right. This was what the Lord God of Israel says, I am about to bring such disaster on Jerusalem and Judah that everyone who hears about it will shudder. I will stretch over Jerusalem the measuring line used on Samaria and the mason's level used on the house of Ahab. And I will wipe Jerusalem clean as one wipes a bowl, wiping it and turning it upside down. I will abandon the remnant of my inheritance and hand them over to their enemies. They will become plunder and spoil to all their enemies, because they have done what is evil in my sight and provoked me from the day their ancestors came out of Egypt until today.
So, is what 2 Kings 21 says true of Pharaoh and his court? Did he wipe the dish clean? Yup. And we already read this about what happened to Ahab and his household. Did Christ wipe Israel clean in 70 AD? Yep, they were just leveled. I mean, there was nothing left except archaeology by the time it was done. So this indictment fits all 3, even though it's only supposed to be applied towards King Ahab and Israel at the time.
Beyond the proofs of a prophet, Moses, Elijah, and Christ were great reformers who delivered their people from disaster. Moses delivered his people from slavery and from the iron furnace of Egypt. Elijah delivered his people and the 7,000 who had not bowed to Baal from the state-sponsored idolatry of Jezebel and Ahab. This idolatry proves such a pervasive culture of a religious intolerance toward the real God that it was manifested into death threats and hiding of the righteous. The advent of the Messiah was expected to bring about deliverance from the Romans, which is what they claimed to have wanted. Yet he came to preach concerning the kingdom of God, a future refuge for the righteous, and to save all mankind from the consequence of the mortal cycle of sin and death. Each man saved the people from slavery, idolatry, and death.
Yep. So, this deliverance is another key element. And we're just gonna touch on this because I'm end a little bit early tonight. But each one of them saved their people from disaster. Moses saved them from Egypt. Elisha saved them from an evil king and queen, and also from Baal worship. And Christ saved everyone for all time by being the atonement sacrifice for the world and for all time. So we're gonna just begin to examine this. And I love this phrase, I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you out myself, from Exodus 19:4. Can I get a reader for this slide?
Okay, Susie, please.
Through, let's see, through scripture, the nation and people of Israel were constantly reminded by God, I brought you out of the land of Egypt with a strong hand. Moses' generation bore witness to the things the Lord revealed that not even Abraham had witnessed as miracles. Those miracles wrought in Egypt had never been seen in any nation or would never occur again. The magnitude of destroying a rich nation without killing your own people and having them as precious as previous slaves walk out of a nation with all its wealth was a feat impossible to imagine.
So if you think about it, you want to take the tumor out of the patient without killing the patient. This was a very difficult thing to do. The Jews were in the land that was going to be punished by God with 10 plagues. The first 3 were the only ones suffered, then he had to separate it. Land of Goshen was spared for all the rest. The last 7 did not happen in Goshen. And you're like, how did God do that? I mean, that is an amazing feat to consider how he accomplished it. Next reader.
All right, Patsy, we're back to you now.
This has never happened in history save with God's ability to deal with mankind in its own kingdoms. This is why the nations are to drop in the bucket, as Isaiah 40:15 suggests, Exodus 6:6. Therefore tell the Israelites, I am Yahweh, and I will deliver you from the forced labor of the Egyptians and free you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched hand and great acts of judgment. God was not going to forget his people. He had promised Abraham in Genesis 15 that his people would be slaves in Egypt for 430 years, and they departed on the exact day of that promise.
Yeah, so this is what God says in Isaiah 40:15, that the nations are just a drop in a bucket. The islands are like dust on the scales. I mean, he makes it even smaller. So he says, I am going to do this great thing. And it hadn't been done in any other country, but God had promised Abraham that this would be the time period that would happen. So then it's recorded in Deuteronomy, God delivering his people from Egypt by the hands of Moses. And so this is a common characteristic that leads us to the transfiguration, that they all knew what it was about. To deliver a people with God on one hand and the people on the other. It was never easy. Moses did not have an easy time delivering this people. If you want to compare it to being in labor, it was the worst labor ever. With contractions, pain, all kinds of threat, and they tested him 10 times in the wilderness, and then 10 times after that, they were reduced to nothing. Same thing with Elijah. He was in fear of his own countrymen. You know, they could have turned him in at any time. He had to get help from outside the country, from the widow of Zarephath, and staying in places that were far flung from the land of Israel. And Christ was no different. Several times people were willing to stone him, people were willing to take them out, and he was trying to deliver them. So there isn't much that hasn't changed in history. People are always trying to kill the ones who are saving them, which is ironic. So let's read Deuteronomy 4.
Okay, Neil, it's your turn.
Deuteronomy. Indeed, ask about the earlier days that precede you, from the day God created man on earth, and from one end of the heavens to the other. Has anything like this great event ever happened? Or has anything like this been heard of? Has the people heard God's voice speaking from the fire as you have and lived? Or is God tempted, or has a God tempted to go and take a nation as his own out of another nation by trials, signs, wonders, and war, by a strong hand and an outstretched arm, by great terrors, as the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? You were shown these things so that you would know that the Lord is God. There is no other besides him. He let you hear his voice from heaven to instruct you. He showed you his great fire on earth, and you heard his words from the fire. Because he loved your fathers, he chose their descendants after them and brought you out of Egypt by his presence and great power, to drive out before your nations greater and stronger than you, and to bring you in and give you their land as an inheritance, as is now taking place.
So he describes the wonder of it. At the beginning of this, it says, has anything like this ever happened? Have you ever heard of anything like this? And it's like the reaction I get from people all the time. It's just a deadpan face, no reaction. And I'm like, these are amazing things. You should be, it's spine tingling to me. Why isn't it to you? And our senses are dull, it feels like. And he says, or has a God attempted to go and take a nation as his own out of another nation? By trials, wonders, and signs, and war, and a strong hand? Nobody has ever seen this. And yet people are like, yeah, we've heard this before. So, this is one of the major characteristics of the three of them, Elijah, Moses, and Christ, is that they delivered a whole people. So let's get another reader for this slide.
All right, Joanne, your turn.
Moses, by the Lord's direction and power, was so effective in Egypt that some pretended to be Jewish to escape God's wrath, and some went with the Hebrews into the desert. The deliverance of the Hebrews from slavery defies all anthropological animals. When a racial group is suppressed, does it rise? Because 10 major devastating plagues and then walk out with all the wealth of the nation. Not until Moses, and nothing compared to it afterward. Consider America's moral turpitude of slavery. It took a national civil war and a presidential proclamation of the Emancipation Proclamation to set slaves free. Then there was another 100 years until civil rights were discussed. Slaves certainly were not given all the wealth of the U.S. to move somewhere else. What Moses accomplished in delivering the Hebrews from slavery, walking out with all of Egypt's wealth and coming into a new land to conquer and occupy, is a Semitic anthropologic anomaly that has never been known in the history of the world.
So seismic there means like an earthquake, and anthropological means it hasn't been seen anywhere in anthropology, anywhere else in history. And anthropology is the study of people, and it is an anomaly. It's the only time we've ever seen it. So it's pretty strong. And this is an Egyptian having 3 Hebrews by the hair. So I'm going to read this one and then we're going to stop because this is about as far as we can go. So who's the next speaker?
Okay, Gerald, if you finish up for us.
Okay, Elijah delivers Israel from idol worship. In a time of nationally sanctioned idolatry, which forced the righteous into hiding, Elijah emerged as the sole champion to defend the zeal of the Lord against all the elements. He is noted for his major reforms, for challenging the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, and for his prophetic word against the household of Ahab and Jezebel, as well as those who were complicit in their crimes. Elijah caused fire to come down from heaven on numerous occasions. That is, the duel between God and Baal on Mount Carmel and the destruction of military units of 50s who came to challenge him in 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 1. Or maybe that's 2 Kings 21. His deliverance of a nation overwhelmed by idolatry came by several means, including challenging the rulers of his day, invoking a plague of drought, and prophesying against those responsible for their wicked influence on the people. His legacy outlives him. Many confirm Elijah's prophecies after he was taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire. Elijah is forecast in Malachi 4, verse 5 as the future prophet, John the Baptist at the advent of Christ.
Okay, so if you think about it, who was the man who caused it not to rain for 3 or more years in Israel during the time of King Ahab and Jezebel? Who prayed it?
Elijah.
Elijah, right. Why did he pray for a drought?
Because of the wickedness in the land.
Right, so if they were prosperous and they were worshiping Baal, then they might assume worshiping Baal brought us prosperity, or Asherah, or any of the other stupid gods they were worshiping. But with a drought, they couldn't doubt that it was a powerless God. Number 2, maybe if the people had their primary needs taken away, they would rise up and get rid of their bad leadership. And he says that in Malachi. He says, I sent you mildew, you did not return to me. I sent you drought so bad you had to go to another town to get a drink. You still didn't return to me. I sent you plagues, you did not return to me. I sent you warfare, you didn't return to me. I sent you disease and all these horrible things, and you didn't return to me. So all this culminates at Mount Carmel. After the 450 prophets of Baal are killed, and all of that's dealt with, so that there's nobody who can threaten the prophets' lives, what does Elijah do? After the whole showdown on Mount Carmel, and they kill the 450 prophets, and he gets the people to do it, then what happens?
He flees.
No. When he's
He
on
asked
the mountain, Go
He
ahead.
asked the Lord to send rain.
Right, so he sends his prophet, he says, go look and see if there's a cloud. And he's praying over and over again for a rain cloud to come. So for 3.5 years, the situation hasn't changed. Who made it change? Elijah and God. He brought this fire down, destroyed all the prophets of Baal afterwards. And now, for the first time, the people know he prayed and brought the rain back. It's closure. It's like bookends on their whole lives. They had nothing, and then he provided it all again after they got rid of their idols. So he's a major reformer. He brings the drought and he cures the drought. He gets rid of the prophets of Baal and turns people's hearts back to God. So the point to us as believers today is that we are here for one purpose, and that is to turn the hearts of people back to serving the Lord. As Jude says, to snatch the burning stick out of the fire before it's too late. So we have this opportunity now while we're alive. When we're dead, it's too late to go in and to try to turn people's hearts by pleading with them, by showing them God's power, that this is the right path. Anything else is going to kill you. But there's always Jezebels who are pulling them in another direction. So these major reforms and delivering a people is something that we can take. It's not just a nice little cute sign that they all shared in common at the Transfiguration. It's what we should all be doing, to deliver people from the voidness of idol worship. And today they're not worshiping Baal and Ashereth, they're worshiping everything else. Possibly even worse than what they were. So let's just think about that for this week, and we'll finish up this next week with this one section. But thank you for your time. Stop that. Yeah, I hope you all had a good week. Was your dinner good there, Patsy?
It was. I was hungry.
What'd you have?
I just had a big salad and I air fried some chicken.
Nice, nice.
And Patsy Ray, once again, happy 42nd anniversary.
Thank you.
That's a good long time.
Yep.
Mhm.
How was you said there was a cold snap out there, Neil?
There was what?
A cold snap in Missouri?
Yeah, we got it. It started Tuesday at 7. They asked me if the temperature is 71. It started dropping 10 degrees an hour
Wow.
and
that's
just
great.
kept going down. And let's see what we are right now. We're sitting at 40, so that's not too bad. We're going to be having some rain Monday, so.
Okay, okay. The other thing I was gonna say, you better start driving now because we got brothers class tomorrow night, so it's gonna take you a while to get started. The brothers class is at Betty and at Pinkston's house tomorrow night. The dinner is from 6 to 7, and then the class is from 7 to 9. Gerald, I hope you're gonna make it, and Mike Cody, if it's possible, and Roger and Walter. I sent an email to everybody. I'll send you one too, Neil. And driving directions.
Joe, what's the subject matter for the class tomorrow evening?
Passion and empathy. I did email it out. Did you guys get it at all?
I did.
Because I sent it to everybody at the hall, everybody at South Hill, everybody at the chapel, Forest Hill.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
please.
got it.
You
I
must
got
not
it,
have-
Gerald.
Can you forward it to Gerald in case he didn't get it? Because I put his name in there twice, hoping it would get to him. I thought. So anyway, well, you all have a wonderful evening, and it was good seeing you again, okay?
Thanks
And-
for class.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
No.
good night all.
We'll see all the gentlemen tomorrow night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
y'all.
Night.